if you are going to put yourself out there, I think it is helpful to build a website, but you should build a website that you can jam out in about an hour. And so that website should have like three main components. It should have some type of attention grabbing headline, like, hey, we build great websites and get great results. It should have what we call a cut to the chase sentence. We help blank with blank so they can get blank. So like we help businesses with websites and digital marketing so they can get leads and clients online. Would you like more leads and clients or help with your website? Book here. And Calendly and a bunch of other tools have like free, you can have like one scheduling link with Calendly for free. So have one appointment type that's like 30 minutes or 15 minutes, and then have that scheduler right on your website. And if you can't figure that out, have a contact form. If you can't figure that out, put your phone number and your email address on there, right? And then boom, you're done.
In this video, my friends, I am joined by my good friend, Brent Weaver from UGURUS, and we are going to be talking about startup agency mistakes. In fact, the key mistakes that most startup digital agency owners make that slow them down in getting results, that prevent them from the greatness that they're trying to achieve. And he's going to walk us through the exact activities that you need to focus on to make sure you have startup success. Let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Brent. Great to have you.
Great to be here.
So, guys, as I mentioned, Brent and I go way back. Some of you even probably found me originally on his podcast, and we often chat about growing, scaling agencies, productization, and things of that nature. And today we're going to kind of switch it up because both myself and Brent have kind of been running into a scenario where more and more people are just getting started now building their agency, and things like productization, scale, SOPs, hiring seem so far removed from what actually is important for the beginner, the person just getting started earlier in their journey, and oftentimes can set them off on a treasure hunt. So today we're talking to the person who's getting started in their agency and looking to get traction. So I know that you've been diving into this topic a lot. So maybe just jump into it. Where do you see the line of, hey, that's too advanced, and like maybe let's take a step back?
I think one of our goals is to help people, at least get enough momentum that they can do their business full time. Because, a lot of the stuff that you and I talk about, like you said, like productization, niching, building funnels. That stuff takes like a lot of focus. And I think when you have maybe a full-time job or you don't feel like secure enough in your income from your agency, some of those like longer term strategic things like finding the right niche or building an amazing like offer that has great product market fit. A lot of those things take time, and they're actually like adopted from more like software development companies, like looking at the lean canvas, for example. So like using some of those tools to find fit, those are things that oftentimes take months, right? And if you're somebody who's just trying to like do web design or digital marketing to like get basic income coming in, sometimes those things can be kind of distractions, or they can become bottlenecks for you actually having a full-time business. And so when we talk to folks that are just trying to kind of get to that survival stage, a lot of the things that they need aren't necessarily that stuff yet, right? It's like, that's the fun stuff about entrepreneurship. And they're asking questions like, hey, how do I set up my bank account properly? How do I take payment? Should I take 100% payment up front or get payment on deliverables? Or these types of questions oftentimes are keeping them from actually being successful out there in the space.
Totally. I've been saying recently, it's like super important to solve the right problem in the right order. And it's challenging because again, like we both talk about these topics that a newer person can come into the game, and the amount of free information that is available, even just on like YouTube alone, you could see what other people are doing and think that, oh, that's exactly what I want to do, and jump into something kind of like as if you were jumping into season 3 of business when like you're in season 0. And it's like some of those reps, for the lack of a better term, like you haven't done them yet. And I think like you could be building something that you might not like, or just again, modeling someone too closely that you're outside of your comfort zone almost immediately. So where do you think people should be starting when they're kind of at this stage?
There's a few different like starting stages. If you literally like have nothing, one of the most important things is just getting some revenue for your business. And I'm not really super choosy on where that comes from. I think if you look at most successful entrepreneurs, myself included, probably yourself, right? If you go back and ask us who our first clients were, many of them were, friends and family, or we kind of say F&F for short, or maybe it was like an employer or past employer. And, while those things aren't like niching necessarily, like your niche might be like, hey, my local network or whatever, like that's your niche for now, is just the people that you have contact with. And I think that it's helpful to get some of those reps, generate some revenue, have some clients, because there's so many things you have to learn. It's like going and trying to hit a baseball for the first time, right? Like there's so many things. Like, how do I hold the bat? Where should I be looking? How fast is this ball going to come at me, right? Like there's so many different factors that you've got to go through it a few times before you're going to go out and maybe go to like the actual game or whatever, and you're going to take hundreds of swings. And so I think a lot of times people start to try to do things like picking a niche, like, and they put so much stress on themselves in trying to like make this decision. And I'm like, hey, like, let's just get out there and start gigging a little bit. And you're going to find some areas that maybe resonate with you, and you can double down on those. And then if you have investment, if you have a huge bank account and you're like, hey, I can spend 6 months like doing customer development and really figuring this out, like, great. If you're a serial entrepreneur, if you've done this like a ton of times and you know how to do it, then you should be going right to niching. You should be strategic. You should do all that kind of stuff. But if you have zero runway, like I've talked to agencies who they're like, if I don't figure this out by the end of the month, my wife's going to force me to get a job. Okay. That agency owner should not be thinking about product market fit and should not be thinking about, niching down. They should be trying to just like do revenue generating activity. They should be calling anybody anywhere that they know and trying to solve problems and generate revenue, however that comes into their business. And I think that's kind of that early launch stage is how do we get people enough revenue, get them to like 6 figures a year. And then the business almost in a way can start to reinvest in itself. And then you can buy yourself time to start being more strategic, start looking at some of the cooler ways to scale up and make money in the agency. I mean, the current agency that I co-own, Unlimited WP, that business was incubated within another white label agency. So we got to start, like we kind of like started from ground zero, but we also had clients from a white label agency that we were able to position back over to this offer. We also were able to start with an amazing partnership with UGURUS that fed a whole bunch of agency clients right through the door on day one. So we kind of had these like hacks. And I think that people might look at it on the outside and we're like, hey, we got to 100K a month in 18 months, right? And they're like, that's so cool. I want to do that. I need to niche. But at the same time, there's other stuff going behind the scenes, right? This is like my 6th business. I've been working with digital agencies now for 20 plus years. I know my niche really, really well. Whereas if I was just starting out today, I had some skills like web design, digital marketing, social media. Maybe those aren't the things that I should be putting to the forefront just yet.
I totally feel that, man. I mean, it's funny. You kind of had me flash back because I was like, oh, I started pretty niche, but that's actually a lie. Like, because when we launched Systemly, which was like the marketing automation agency that actually did well, that was launched alongside of me slamming my face into a brick wall for a year and a half of trying to get the mobile marketing company off the ground, which is like when I left corporate, which I think a lot of people like, we see people leave corporate with a ton of expertise and a Rolodex. And it's like, well, you kind of come in with 20K or 30K a month of client revenue that kind of came from some previous engagement. And like, you're kind of figuring it out. Like I had that agency and we were like doing 10 or 15K a month, but like I couldn't get past that. And I had been building all of the relationships with the people that were using Infusionsoft at the time. And so like, it felt like I just launched into that. But like for 2 years, I was friends with people using Infusionsoft, not doing anything with it until I learned Infusionsoft. I was like, hey, can I help you with this? And I did start pretty like, again, I just took whatever I could get. Like $200 a month was like my first client at Systemly, which was a horrible, great, but a horrible idea. But to that point, like, I think maybe it's, I don't know, again, I don't know why this is, or maybe it's just because we're older now. There's more and more people that aren't necessarily coming out of corporate or a previous agency that have some of those assets. And like you said, like maybe they got laid off and they're now like, I got to do this or my wife's going to go make me look for a real job. And I kind of want to give this a shot. Where do I start? It's okay for the niche at that point to be the person who's going to give you the credit card and has a pulse, right? Like we kind of joke at that when you're doing 200K a year, like, why do you take anybody? You shouldn't. But it's like in the beginning, yeah, take anybody because it's money.
Well, and two, like, I think you had that like 10 to 15K in revenue, right? I think there's a lot of people, at least based on a lot of folks that are coming through our funnel. I mean, we've been very much at UGURUS, we've been selling very much to established agency owners for the last like 10 plus years. While we're doing that, we constantly get people that are like, hey, can you help me? I'm just starting out. And we've always been like, no, don't want to deal with it. Right. And, I think we just, this last couple of years, maybe because of COVID, because people are tired of having jobs, they want to work remote, or people are forcing them to come back to the office. They're looking at an agency as a good alternative to that to get the freedom that they want. And I think that's something that's very positive. I mean, one of the big pluses of an agency business model is that you can be cash flow positive with basically zero down. Like you don't need to have a lot of equipment. A lot of people have a laptop. Maybe their employer gave them a laptop or they have a personal laptop. They have some set of skills that they've been able to develop or learn through, free training and stuff like that online. And so they're in a good position to like create their own enterprise. And one of the mistakes that we see is that people adopt like a software business model where they spend 6 months trying to figure out what the business is. And the plus side of an agency is you don't need to do that. You can find clients that are willing to pay you before you have a portfolio, before you have case studies, before you have a website. I mean, we've launched into verticals where we had literally no website presence. We had no brand name. I was just calling people and like saying, hey, we can solve this problem for you. And, they'd say, okay, cool. And we'd send them like a Stripe invoice. Like it's not pretty. There's no details on it, like verbal agreement. And, we were very confident in our ability to deliver on that, but it was like very bare bones kind of offer. And I think that's the approach that we try to encourage people to do is get some cash flow coming in, do what I call RGA, revenue generating activity. So like in your situation, right, you had a big network of people that knew Infusionsoft.
Yeah.
Good starter step would be like sitting down with a spreadsheet and like unpacking your network, putting it all in a spreadsheet. A lot of people feel weird about telling people they have a business. If you're doing like some crazy AI stuff and you've been working at Google for the last like 8 years and you have like legitimate IP and you're going to build a product, cool. Like tell that to the right people at the right time. If you're doing like web design or social media or digital marketing or automation or, pay-per-click advertising, this is not something to be kept as a secret. We don't want to keep your business as a secret. You need to go out there and tell everybody. And like, I literally will have people say, I don't want to tell anybody about my business yet. And I'm like, why? Are you scared you get customers? And I'm like, oh, no, I need customers. I just don't think I'm ready yet. And I'm like, ready for what? Like,
yeah,
I just don't know if I'm ready for people to know yet. I'm like, no, this is a business. This is like,
Right.
Let's imagine that you want people contacting you.
So here's a question for you. Cause you said earlier, like, with UGURUS right now, and even us, like for so long, we like kind of the intro into our worlds is like you use the word established business, and then you went down to the other spectrum of like, hey, like you're literally just getting started with nothing. So can you maybe put a ceiling? Like, how do you? I guess one, how do you define? This is a two-part question. Like, how do you define established for the sake of the rest of this conversation? And when we go back to like, hey, go get whatever, right? Go get some gigs. Are we continuing this conversation from the perspective of you have some sort of skill or interest that aligns with marketing creative type agency services? Like, or is this doable even for the person who's like, I want to start an agency, but I don't really know anything about marketing. I'm not a designer. Can you kind of set each side of the spectrum for us?
I definitely don't think, so established for us, we kind of pull an arbitrary line. We look at right around 100K a year. That's $8,400 a month in revenue for a one-person business. So that's really what I would look at as an established business. Now, that's not actually like, if you look at somebody who's charged $125 an hour and they have 1,000 billable hours in a year, that means they're billing half of their time and they're taking 2 weeks off of vacation. So that means they're only billing 20 hours per week, 50 hours per year. That's $125K a year business. That's a little bit over $10,000 per month, right? So if you're doing 100K per year in billings and you're one person, that means that you're actually billing probably less than $1,000 a year. Or if you're doing a lot more work than that, then we have like a pricing problem, we have a positioning problem. And this is where some of these like fundamental things need to kind of come into play. So like if you're somebody who can do that, I think you're now an established like business. You're not really at an agency because it's just like a thing. Like you're just like a business of one. But I think from there, you can start bringing on team members, VAs, et cetera. You might be able to start thinking about things like niching and productization and other really fun things, right? More because you can actually do your craft, do your work on your business full time. You're not like saddled with a full-time job, but there's a lot of folks that don't have that stability yet. They're kind of like a freelancer or they have an agency. It's like, and I'll talk to people that have like, there'll be like 4 people in the business and they're making like $6K a month. And I'm like, this is not viable yet. There should not be 4 people in the business, right? That's a problem. So I think and what was the other question? There was the
well, so that was like, you kind of hit us on the top end of that. Yeah. And then so from there, like, does this work whether you have a skill and you only have an interest in a particular area? Or do you feel like we're kind of coming from, hey, these revenue generating activities, all the things that we're about to talk about kind of require you to have some directional experience?
Yeah. So I don't think an agency should really be like a biz op. I think that running an agency is about getting results for clients, and in a, kind of to step back, the agency is really like a staff augmentation business model, because you have clients who have, maybe they're $1 million, $2 million, $10 million a year business. They don't have a web team. They don't have a digital marketing team. They can come in and get a fraction of your team for a fraction of the amount of money it would take to pay a full-time team. I mean, if I had a full-time web developer, full-time SEO, full-time digital marketer, and a marketing leader, I mean, that's 50-ish K a month, right? Once you count benefits, salaries, whatever, maybe 30 to 50K, right? That's a very large salary. I can hire an agency at 5K a month. I can get all those skills and services for a fraction of the cost. And so running an agency is about getting clients results. In order to get clients results, you do need to have some level of skill. And so at least for us to evaluate whether we help agencies launch or not, we definitely require that they have some type of billable or marketable skill. If they don't have that, then they should go out there and do that. They should probably get a job. They should probably take some courses, try to figure out how to make ends meet. Now, if they have a marketable skill, which is they know how to manage projects and manage people, and they know what a great website looks like, and they understand the pieces to get there, but they're not a WordPress developer or they're not a graphic designer, like, that's okay. That's still a billable skill. You're basically more of an account strategist. You are going to have to rely on doers earlier on in the process, or maybe, use tools to a greater extent than somebody else would. And that's okay. I think you still have a marketable skill in that space. But if you come in and you're like, hey, I don't know anything about digital marketing. I don't know anything about doing anything digital, and I want to build an agency, at least for us, we would say, hey, look, an agency is not the right fit for you yet. You need to go get a marketable, billable skill, or learn how to hire and manage other people to do that. Probably better to do that on somebody else's dime, unless, again, you have like a large amount of investment. But an agency business model is not one that you typically need to have a lot of investment for. So it's almost kind of like, if I had $500,000 to invest in a business or $100,000 to invest in a business, like, would I do a scrappy agency as the business model? Like, probably not. I probably look at other businesses initially versus going an agency model.
So you kind of touched on something a little bit earlier. Now we're talking, specifically to this person. I think that's kind of clear, the stage that they're in. Okay, like, I got to get going. Brent, where do I start? Do I start with building a website? That was a layup, if you couldn't tell.
Yeah, no, no is the answer to that question. I think clients definitely like Trump marketing materials. So actually getting people that are willing to pay you, buddy. People don't need you to have a website, because initially the types of clients you're going to get for your first clients are probably going to be within your network of know, like, and trust. And so a website is not going to do anything to sell somebody who already knows you. I mean, my first client was a candy store in Michigan that my business partner at the time, he was a high school classmate of mine. So my high school classmate's dad would go hunting and he would buy candy at this store, and they had these fax order forms, and he said, hey, I think my son and his friend can build you a website. Like, that was it, right? I mean, there was no big pitch. It was very inexpensive. It took us a couple of days to build her a site. We didn't, we made a lot of money for the age that we were at, but it wasn't like, I didn't retire on that project, right? If you are going to put yourself out there, I think it is helpful to build a website, but you should build a website that you can jam out in about an hour. And so that website should have 3 main components. It should have some type of attention grabbing headline, like, hey, we build great websites and get great results. It should have what we call a cut to the chase sentence. We help blank with blank so they can get blank. So we help businesses with websites and digital marketing so they can get leads and clients online. Would you like more leads and clients or help with your website? Book here. And Calendly and a bunch of other tools have free, you can have one scheduling link with Calendly for free. So have one appointment type that's 30 minutes or 15 minutes, and then have that scheduler right on your website. And if you can't figure that out, have a contact form. If you can't figure that out, put your phone number and your email address on there, right? And then boom, you're done. right? We're not going in and like messing around with the logo, the color scheme, like all that time that you're spending on your quote unquote brand, you should be actually spending on what I would consider to be branding, which is going out there and building relationships with people and building a perception of your business out there in the actual wild, right? Which would be, calling, emailing people, personal messaging them, and acting like getting clients is an emergency. A lot of people that I talk to, they're like, yeah, I'll get to that. And I'm like, no, like, especially if you have business that's doing like 3K, 2K a month. I'm like, hey, this seems like an emergency, right? Like we're at emergency level. We're less than 10K a month. This is an emergency. Let's treat it like that. So we should be letting everybody know that we have this thing. Like, I don't care if we're calling like Granny Wilma from, you haven't talked to her in 6 months because, she told you to wear better clothes or something. Like we're calling everybody in our network and we're saying, hey, I have a business. I need your help. I'd love for you to help me get in front of some people that might need these types of services. Is there anybody that you might know? And you're asking for advice. You're asking for help from everybody that you know. And that right there is going to be one of your best marketing assets. Now, is that scalable? Hell no. Is that sustainable? Hell no. Right. But there's some juice in that tank. And that can help you oftentimes then get to that next level where you have some cash flow, you have some clients coming in, you're getting those reps in, and then now you can start to think about some other problems to solve in your business.
Yeah. What's funny is like, actually, it's not funny at all. It's horrible that like some of the established businesses that, we encounter should be treating some of these things like an emergency too. And they're not. So if you are just beginning, don't worry. There are people way further ahead of you that still should be doing some of the fundamentals that we're talking about here today.
We have like this like kind of launch program or whatever for brand new agencies. And one of the modules we talk about accounts receivables and how to deal with people and how they pay you and things like that. And a lot of folks, I think, get weird with money, especially in the creative services space. Like all of a sudden, like money gets brought up and it's like this weird, ethereal, like, I don't want to call people, like, I'll have people that have like outstanding invoices for 4 months and they're like, yeah, this client hasn't paid it yet. And I'm like, well, when's the last time you asked them to pay it? And they're like, well, I haven't asked them to pay it. I mean, I sent the invoice and they just haven't paid it. I'm like, so wait, you sent the invoice 4 months ago and they haven't paid it and you've never followed up on them again. And they're like, no, I just don't like bugging people for money. And I'm like, okay, so here's how this is going to work. You're going to call them today and you're going to be like, hey, just want to make sure you got that invoice. It hasn't been paid yet. And, whatever. And then I get a call or text like, 30 minutes later, like, oh my God, they totally forgot about it. You wouldn't believe it. They thanked me for calling them and they paid it today. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. So we're going to set up what we call a dunning process where if a client doesn't pay, you're going to have some type of follow-up with them. And better yet, having your clients pay in full upfront, having them keep payment details on file, right? I mean, these are some of the kind of rookie mistakes. I mean, I'll talk to agency owners that are doing $3 million a year and I'll say, why are you still on deliverable billing? And they're like, I don't know. It's because we've always been on deliverable billing. I'm like, why don't you offer your clients a pay in full offer? And they're like, why would they pay upfront for a website? I'm like, well, because you're offering it. Like they're not paying upfront because we're not offering it. Like if you offer it and you give them an option, like, hey, you can pay, 30 grand up front, or you can pay this in, 3 payments of $12,000, or you can pay this in 6 payments of X, right? Whatever, present it and give them the choice and you'll be surprised what happens. And, I'll have clients that I get a text message back. They're like, oh my God, we just got pay in full for a website. Never happened before. We can't believe this is possible. Like, whatever. And then they're not chasing a client, right? Or giving your client unfair leverage over you where the client doesn't want to give you content. The client doesn't want to give you feedback. The client doesn't want to give you revisions. And all of a sudden the client has leverage over you and leverage over your cash flow. And so these are the types of things where like, if you start your agency the right way from day one, let's just make sure we have those types of like pro tips in there. But those are obviously beneficial for people that are more established, right? Some people listen to this program might be like, I still bill on deliverables 50-50 for 100K projects that take 8 months, right? And they never question it because it's just how they've always done it.
If I'm like Sammy Startup over here and I'm like, but Brent, what about recurring revenue? What would you say to that at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think having a good, depending on what your service offering is, certain offerings are better suited for recurring than others. One of the things that I like to kind of preach around recurring is solving chronic issues that don't necessarily go away, that are best with treatment. So things like digital marketing, things like ad management, SEO, et cetera, right? These are things that are great for retainers or, subscriptions, things that are going to be kind of continuous and ongoing, right? Like mentorship and coaching, right? Like you always got to have a coach, right? Like I have coaches, I spend more money. I know you spend way more money on coaching and mentorship than probably like half the influencers combined.
Oh, geez, no.
But like, you always got to have this thing, right? It's like getting outside perspective is not you don't just get it once and you're like, oh, good, I got my coaching. Like I'm good with that, right? And so I think if you're an agency that's doing branding or website builds, these large assets that you have to create once, like that actual initial project, it's typically better to position those as a project. So you just have to look at what your service offering is. So certain models, great for pure retainer based, right? If you're doing digital marketing, lead gen, et cetera, you should be 100% retainer. If you're doing stuff like website and branding, then you're going to have more of that hybrid, like some projects, some retainers, and that's usually a good mix. If you can get to 50-50, like 50% kind of projects, 50% retainer-based revenue, I think that puts a web agency into a good position or a branding agency in a good position where they're not totally reliant on these big lumpy revenue events, but they have some kind of continuity there. Now, if you're somebody who's thinking about this kind of stuff, hopefully that means that you have more of an established business. You've been gigging for a little while. You're starting to think about, okay, which types of clients do I prefer most? For some people, like I know we have several members that are pure like WordPress, like support and maintenance. So they're a web design company kind of, but they've decided to be 100% retainer based, but they're not really building websites. They're just doing like WordPress plugin maintenance, updates, that kind of thing. So I think you could evolve one way or the other or kind of find your sweet spot. But then I have some clients that like don't want to have the ongoing retainers because they just find that they're having to constantly, like they actually enjoy having these like big ramp ups and ramp downs. They like to wash their hands of the clients for, periods of 3 to 6 months. And so I think some of that will come down to preference, which is, I think, really hard when you're somebody who has 6 months experience as an entrepreneur and you're like, hey, I want to have an agency. Like, what's right for you? Like, I don't know. You're probably going to have to like try some things on and figure out what works.
Some of those scenarios definitely skew a little bit more towards that established person. But I think why I brought that up was because, like you said, a common mistake is like back to like how they bill. Almost no matter what service you end up providing, most of the work is like your cost to deliver is going to be incurred right away. And so it's like, if you don't collect enough money and yet you have all this work, oftentimes the stress, oh my God, I got to get this next client, but I got to finish this project that I just got. It kind of puts you in this weird cycle of like, well, I need more money, so I need to go get another client, but I have to finish this project. And like now you're torn and back to we'll just try to collect it up front.
The robbing Peter to pay Paul scenario. So that's what we like. It's like this really like, it's like the shuffle, like the agency shuffle is like, hey, and a lot of that comes from, like you said, not collecting enough up front.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the typical billing paradigm, let's say you're going to work on a website, you think the website's going to take, and again, I'm using website as like a project. Yeah. Let's say you think it's going to take 8 weeks, which might be optimistic. Maybe your client's like, you didn't know they were about to go on a cruise for a month and a half, right? And they're totally AWOL and they're not responding to your emails and all this kind of stuff. And let's say the project ends up taking 4 months, right? So let's say this is a $20,000 engagement. It's 4 months. You took 50% up front and 50% on completion because you thought this is going to be over in 2 months. Well, what ends up happening is if this ends up taking 4 months, instead of 2 mortgage payments, that's 4 mortgage payments. That's, 4 teamwork or ClickUp subscriptions, right? Like, all those bills are hitting monthly. And let's say your agency is 25% net margin. So after all costs at the end of the year, you got 25% in profit. What you're actually doing for that client, because your net profit, right? You've only collected 50%. The project life cycle is actually taking 4 months. So in some ways, you're having to pay contractors or your own time, and you're actually going into the red. Now, most agencies aren't technically going in the red because they're not necessarily leveraging lines of credit. They don't have large capital or machinery. They don't have inventory. Usually what going in the red for an agency owner means is that the agency owner withholds payment to themselves. So they augment their personal take-home salary. So maybe that week or month, they don't take pay, or they take a reduced payment and they just go, hey, it's okay. And I'll hear people say like, I take what's left, Brent. And that's always like, it just like drives me up a wall because basically it means that we have no clear idea of our business financials. And so that last 2 months, right? Basically that last month is your profit. The second month though, is when we're digging into our own pay, or somehow we're funding that project to be completed. In that example, by just simply switching their billing from 50% due up front and then 25% on month 1 and 25% on month 2, regardless of deliverables. So remove deliverables from the equation altogether. They can actually get all of their money up front. They're not then tied to the client's whims of when they want to get feedback and content back, and then they don't get themselves into that cash flow situation. Now, some people will say things to me like, well, Brent, but then what's my motivation for finishing the project? And I'm like, okay, well, in terms of like business integrity and business ethics, like let's go ahead and say like permission to play. If you commit to doing work, you need to do what you say you're going to do, when you're going to do it, under what budgets you're going to do it, and all that good stuff. But you don't need to put yourself into a cash flow crisis just because you need some kind of carrot at the end of a project. And I think that comes with a little bit of seasoned business ownership, that you just deliver what you say you're going to deliver and that kind of stuff. But I know it can sometimes be difficult up front, like you have that motivation for the financials or something.
Yeah. So we got like super simple landing page, not full-blown website. We got collecting more money up front. You talked about obviously taking different gigs, and you mentioned, you kind of started talking about, I'm not sure if we kind of bypass some of it, but like the revenue producing activities. Like you talked about the calling all the people in your network. Did we cover all of the revenue producing activities, or was there more stuff that we skipped?
I mean, there's always revenue producing activities, but I think, letting people know that you exist, right? I mean, generating continuous lead flow is just a part of business. And at every stage of your business, this is going to evolve and be different. What lead gen looks like for myself and Greg is probably very, very different than a brand new business. Like we have marketing assets, we have lists, we have SEO rankings, we have, YouTube followings, we have personal networks within our market we can tap for all sorts of stuff. But if you show me somebody's activities, I can probably give you a pretty strong predictor of their outcomes. And a lot of activities that I see people doing are things like, hey, I message people on LinkedIn. Okay, awesome. Right? Did you know that the average user logs into LinkedIn less than once per month? So if you know that you have a personal contact on LinkedIn and you're choosing LinkedIn as the path to message them. If I'm like, hey, Greg, I'm going out on my own, I'm going to have my own agency or whatever, and I send you that email, the law of averages says that you might get that in the next month at some point, right? So once per month. By the average user logs into Facebook like probably once an hour or something like that, right? And so just by, maybe they're just on, like it's just connected to their frontal lobe or something, right? So by just choosing if I'm going to message my network, by just choosing Facebook Messenger instead of LinkedIn might be a better call. Now, if I'm trying to reach out to cold prospects, I don't know. Again, I hear people all the time trying to make LinkedIn work in that way. I'm not sure if that's my cup of tea, but again, if you show me how many activities, like, hey, I reached out to 100 cold businesses, 100 people, they're all logging in less than once per month, probably less than 5% chance that they're going to engage with you. So if we just look at those numbers, so less than 1 in 30 chance that they're going to look at your message today, less than 1 in 20 chance that they're going to ever reply to your message at all, probably a less than 1 in 100 chance they're ever going to book an appointment with you. If we want to run those types of number, if we want to do that tactic, great. We need to create a system and a system of activities that's going to actually benefit that. Usually what we recommend for people earlier on is to build lists of groups that are maybe more accessible for them, that are going to put them in front of an audience with some level of authority, because an agency ultimately is an authority business. You're providing expertise to another business. So for you to be put into a position of authority on a podcast, on a blog, on a local chamber group or whatever, is usually going to get you much better exposure, much better traction earlier than cold outbound, right? If you have no clients and you have no experience and you have no, whatever, and you're reaching out to people that don't even know you, and you've never told the people that know you that you have a business, then that's just an easy misstep, right? Let's focus on the people that know, like, and trust you first. And then, maybe later create a scalable LinkedIn engine if you feel like it. I'm not totally jaded on that channel, but I hear a lot of people calling us and saying that they just dropped $3,000 a month for 6 months on some, LinkedIn lead gen agency and got no results. And, it's a tough gig if you want to go that route.
Yeah. It's like the people that are active, unless your market is the people that are active on LinkedIn every day, which are usually the creator, if LinkedIn has influencers, but the people that are out there and their job is kind of creating content, right? It's a piece of their system because they're super well established. If that's your market, cool. They'll be logging in every day, but most agencies aren't targeting those. We're working this manufacturing business. Why is the CEO of the manufacturing business on LinkedIn every single day? They're not.
Yeah. You're not going to see the open to work on some CEOs. Hey, I'm open to work. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, right? I mean, there are those people, I think, to your point, if that's your target market and you know that they're there, then great. But I'll talk to people who have, let's say they have 400 contacts on LinkedIn, and 150 of those people they have a direct email address for, and they potentially have a phone number in their iPhone or whatever. Why not just send them a text message? message, right? Like, I mean, text message is definitely like, there's still some like sanctuariness to it, right? We don't want to like get too crazy and too like outboundy a little bit, right? I mean, these days, like probably less so. But if it's somebody that already you have a relationship with, I mean, I still personally look at my text messages under almost any circumstance. You know, I have a family, I've got kids in school, my wife and I are texting constantly. Like text messages is the one area where I'm pretty much always going to read it. Now, I'm not telling everybody to go out there and text message me if you want me as a client or something.
Everyone, Brent's phone number is in the description of this video.
If you know somebody, like a mistake that I made early on in my agency was we had network that we were not tapping. We knew people, we had their phone numbers, and the only reason that I didn't reach out to them was because I believed if they needed something, they would reach out to me. The reality is nobody is thinking about you ever. And if you can just get that idea through your head, like nobody's thinking about you. Like if you make them think about you, they'll think about you, right? But like minus your mother, like outside of her, right? Or your father, right? They're not thinking about you. They're thinking about their own stuff, right? Just like you're thinking about your stuff. I used to think like, oh man, if they need help with something, they'll reach out to me. I don't want to bother them, right? You know, if you have a relationship with somebody, like they want to conspire to help you succeed. And so give them that opportunity, let them help you, and also just remind them that you exist. And you wouldn't be surprised, like when people reach out and just say, hey, there's so many times you get the response of like, hey, I've been meaning to touch base with you. I've been meaning to connect with you. I have some really cool stuff that we should do together, right? And you're like, wait, what? And the only reason they didn't do that was because they were busy, right? They got lives, they got sick kids, they got all sorts of stuff coming on. And you have to just learn how to take that initiative. And I think once you can adopt that mindset of it's my job to make people think about me, it's not their job, then I think once you take that ownership, it gives you incredible freedom and control over the success of your business.
100%. The making people think about you and know about you is super critical. And quite frankly, if this makes anyone feel any better, and or for some reason the established person who's growing quickly is watching this video, you should be doing this too if you're not. Like when we modified our offers, I like literally looked at my Instagram, which, you know, for the most part is very personal. Like a lot of my followers are personal, or like, okay, even if you had like 400 people that were following you on Instagram, go message every single one of them. Be like, hey, been a long time since we last connected. Here's what I'm doing now for these types of people, or I'm interested in working with these types of people. If you know anybody, let me know. Because even if they see it, and even if they don't respond, when they meet the person who you just described in that message, they will think of you, or at least more likely to think of you had you not sent that message. And so like, even if you had 400 contacts that aren't those ideal people, you can still go tell those people who your ideal person is, or who you're thinking about, or what you do, so that you do come to mind in more scenarios. And I think people overlook that too.
When we were kind of early on in our agency, we got a decent amount of success with like referral, word of mouth, just kind of scrappiness. But we got to a point right around like, I don't know, $500,000 a year where we kind of plateaued, where like the referral word of mouth engine wasn't really sustaining the growth. Mm-hmm. And actually in some bad ways, right, was not helping us to cover like payroll, because we'd done all the things that you probably think you should do, right? We had like got an office and hired employees and gotten like a fiber line run to our space and like had all sorts of $500 a month air conditioning bill, and we had a lot of overhead at that level. We're trying to figure out like, well, why did clients come to us? And we went down our entire client roster, and we had, I don't know, 130, 140 clients at the time. And most of them came to us through some kind of referral. And we're like, okay, well, that's super helpful. But then I looked at when they got referred. So like, when did we sign them as a client? Who were they referred from? What was going on with that person when they referred us? And the vast majority of the time that people referred us was when they had an active engagement or active ongoing project with us. I was like, okay, well, why is that? Well, probably, obviously, we're top of mind with whoever we're working with, and they're out there in the world, and they're going to happy hours, and they're going to business meetings, and people ask them like stupid questions like, hey, Joe, like what's going on? And what's going on in your world right now? And they'll say things like, oh, hey, actually, we're getting a new website. Like I'm really involved in it right now. And they would talk about it with whoever they're talking to, and that person would go, oh, you're getting a website? Do you like your person? And they'd say, yeah, we love their Hot Press Web. They're great. We love working with them. And boom, we'd get a referral. That for me was like this big epiphany. I was like, oh, so I have all these other clients that we're not active with. I need to go out there and become front of mind with them. And so we started running like lunch and learns. We started inviting clients into our office. Like we had an office, like why not use it? Like our conference room was empty. Like, pretty much like 98% of the time that we didn't have a client meeting in there. So we started inviting like small groups of clients in just to like teach them about stuff. And like, we'd give them like coffee, or like I'd go meet a client for coffee or whatever. And we weren't doing like fancy stuff. We would just try to stay front of mind with them. And at a very simple level, like that got the referral engine juices like flowing from our entire customer base versus just the people that we had active projects with. These days, I feel like I have better ways to build awareness than inviting people over to my home office in Castle Rock and like running the lunch and learn or whatever. We can put money into the Facebook meter. We can do really cool podcasts like this and get our message out to thousands of people. But we still constantly are going back to our current clients and making sure that we're always top of mind with them, making sure that we're checking in with them, making sure that they know what our new products and services are. I mean, we've got people that maybe we worked with them 6 years ago, and who they think UGURUS is today isn't really who UGURUS is today. And so we have to go out there and have a conversation and say, hey, this is what we're working on. Here's what we have. Any advice or any recommendations on how we can get into front of more people like this? And a lot of people will say, hey, no, not right now. And that's fine too, right? But then you get 1 in 5, 1 in 10 that say, hey, you know what? This would be great. Let's do something, right? And then boom, you get more leads and get more clients.
I'll add one little quick story on that, and then we can land the plane. I remember like early days of Systemly when we were building like webinar funnels for people. Thankfully, I had some friends that had big audiences and things like that, but like we evolved. Like you said, like we don't do the same things anymore. And I remember getting referrals from some of those early clients, and I'm like, I don't want to do that type of work anymore. We don't do that anymore. Like, why are they sending that person my way? And now I feel like an a-hole turning this person down who just got referred from this person who I do value and trust and like, and now I feel guilty. I'm like, oh wait, I never went back and told any of these people that we don't do that anymore. So of course they're going to keep sending what we did for them because that's all they know. It's like, all right, we got to go back and tell all the old clients that might refer us for what we did for them for this new thing. And again, so just, I think to your point, like, letting people know is actually important at all stages, especially as you evolve, but more so, like you said, even in the beginning, like just because that's going to be one of your main opportunity flows, your opportunity vehicles. So,
and not to be like shy about it, like I think maybe something big will change in my life or in my business. Right. And I'll put like a Facebook post about it. And I think that, okay, so you caught the attention of however many people, like your post about, hey, we're doing things different in our agency. We're going to be offering SEO services, right? Like, or whatever your thing is, right? You were mashed between different videos of like corgis, which I just got a Corgi Aussie mix. Your little post about your cool business update is in between like funny, awesome videos of like corgis doing yoga on my feed. And so like, if I had to choose between like what's going on new with Greg's business and what's going on with like corgis doing yoga, like depending on my mindset that day, I might choose one or the other. And so when I look at somebody who's actually like gotten the word out, it's that, you've saturated your market. I would push it to the point where people start saying, hey, yeah, got it. Yeah, I know what you do now. Like, I love it. I'm good. Right. But if you're not getting that kind of message, which you never will, nobody's ever going to tell you it's too much because it's never too much. They want to hear from you, but having that repetition in there, right? What's that?
Maybe your wife.
Yeah, your wife might be like, all right, enough. I know you switched your business model. I know you're doing something really cool. You got a fun new funnel. But I think if your network, if you're emailing them, if you're texting them, you're having a conversation with them, you get like visual eye confirmation that they're actually listening to you, because there'll be people that I know and are really close to me in my heart, and they still don't know I work with agencies. And I will literally be on a conversation with them, say like, oh, I help agencies do this thing. And they're like, well, yeah, but I know some plumbers and they really need help going. No, you understand. Like, I work with agency owners, digital agencies, right? And so sometimes you just have to have that repetition there. There's like an old saying that somebody has to hear something 7 times before they hear it the first time. And that means you actually put your message in front of them. They've actually like read it, heard it, etc. But they got to really hear it 7 times before they're really going to connect and go, okay, I know where to put somebody into a box, right? I know how to bucket somebody and categorize them, and then I can refer them and I can start to help them connect with other people.
I love it. So guys, this is basically like a crash course on the fundamentals of getting started. Now, what I want to say is most of what we discussed and what Brent shared with us today are actually simple to do, which also means they're even more simple to not do. So you've actually have gone out and done something about this because people need help actually being held accountable to doing some of these things. So for those people that are watching that are like, yes, like I need to do this stuff. These are things that are relevant to me right now. Like, you're working on something. where are we sending people? Because you got someone that can help.
Yeah. So you can go to UGURUS.com. We've got a new program called U Academy Launch. If you are watching this between March 11 and March 15th, we're running a bunch of free live events with, similar content. We'll have some of our tools, some of our more formal training in those sessions. So if that's something of interest, definitely just go to UGURUS.com. Maybe we'll put a direct link to the event registration in the comments. And yeah, we'd love to help you guys, go from that like part-time side hustle, early stage agency of, up to that kind of sustainable 6-figure a year business.
I love it, guys. So yeah, check everything in the description below this video. We'll have all those links there as well. Brent, as always, it's great chatting with you. Thank you so much for sharing the basics. Because what do they say? Even the most successful people never stop doing the basics.
Yeah, man, love it. Like, always glad to share with your people, and love the great work that you're doing on this channel and with agencies all over the world. And all I hear is good things. So thanks, Greg.
Thank you.